Well, welcome to The Verdict. I'm Mick Cornett. Kent Myers has the week off. Glad you could join us. Today, we're going to learn more about urology with Dr. Michael S. Cookson. He's the chairman of urology at the OU Health Sciences Center. Hope you'll stay with us. We'll be right back with more of The Verdict.
I've always been a public servant. I've served either tribes, I've served the federal government, or I've served state governments. The law allows me to express my natural desire to advocate. My name is Stephanie Cochran. I am an attorney and I am Chickasaw. Lawyers give their clients, and in my case, tribal governments, a voice. And it's through legal decisions that tribes have been able to accomplish and to regain some much lost footing that they encountered in the late 1800s and the 1900s. When I reflect back on this time in history, I think I'll look at it in terms of opportunity. And I think now we have to turn those opportunities into long-term success for our future generations.
See more stories about the Chickasaw people at profilesofanation.com.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett without Kent Myers this week, but Kent will be back with us in a couple of weeks. Today we're going to learn more about urology from the chairman of the urology department at the OU Health Science Center. And Dr. Michael Cookson's got a pretty interesting life going on. He has one thing in common with me and only one thing from the educational side, and that is he is a journalism graduate from the University of Oklahoma, which I found fascinating. You don't see a lot of journalism graduates heading into the medical field, but indeed that's what he did. After graduating with his journalism degree, he went to the OU Medical School. And then he did his residency at the University of Texas in San Antonio, did a fellowship in New York City at Sloan Kettering. But he spent the last 15 years at Vanderbilt University over in Nashville, honing his skills, and he has now returned to Oklahoma. And I say returned, Dr. Cookson, because you mentioned you lived a lot of places growing up. Your dad was in the Air Force, in the military, but one of those places was Tinker Air Force Base. So remind us, what era was that, and what do you have in memories of those years in Midwest City?
So yeah, it was the 80s, and we had a great experience in Midwest City, and I went there up until my sophomore year of high school. Air Force family, 7 kids. They all live in the area. My parents have passed now, but lots of family and friends in the area. My wife's from Oklahoma. We met during medical school, and then had been away for 25 years, only to return to find such amazing developments in the city, at the Health Science Center, and in the city in general. Many of them you've been instrumental in.
Yeah, give us a perspective on growing up in a military family and moving a lot. How do you think that shaped the person you are today?
Well, you never really know where you're from. People always ask where you're from, and
it's a hard answer.
Exactly. But you learn to adapt in the environment that you're in. You learn to make friends. You learn to sort of cherish the moment that you're in. It's been great. I think that was a great way to learn to do. I went to some of my high school in Germany, so you learn different cultures. I've lived in the Philippine Islands, so you get a broader perspective of the world in general.
When you went to journalism school, were you thinking about medical school afterwards?
Yeah, well, I'd always thought about medical school since I had a football injury in high school.
Really?
But there was no real pre-med degree. I liked to write, and the journalism school was a perfect place to use those talents. And then lots of medicine involves writing papers and translating our data from the science to the written word, and so it's really been helpful for me to have that as part of my background.
Tell us about the football injury. What happened there?
Well, I had a knee injury, so I had the triad injury, with an ACL and knew that I wasn't going to be in the NFL. I probably knew that long before the injury, but it got me very interested in healthcare, and I sort of set my goal towards that and fulfilled it.
Uh-huh. And how did you transition into urology? You had a lot of options available to you, I would assume, as a young medical student?
Well, urology is an interesting surgical subspecialty. It allows you to have lots of technology at your fingertips, so lasers, now we have robotics, lots of neat things, gadgets, long-term relationships with our patients though. Many of our patients remain with us, so for example in management of men with prostate cancer, we will have long-term success with their treatments and then develop long-term relationships. So it allows you to be a surgeon and a little bit of a primary care doctor all in one, and yet become a specialist. And you know, I think a specialist is a man who knows more and more about less and less, and we know a lot about one thing, and that's the urologic organs.
You mentioned you're a specialist in urology, but you've also done some work and have some interest in Oklahomans' men's health in general. Expound on that, because we struggle in a lot of those areas.
Yeah, so one of the things that I was charged with when I came back was, let's teach, the students some things about men's health, because they needed an overview. And so I looked up the report card on the state of Oklahoma, and I learned some interesting things. And one of the things that I learned was, in football you want to be number one, but at some of these healthcare lists, so for example, heart disease, we're third in the nation in heart disease in men. Obesity, we're number 6 in the country, and stroke, hypertension, it goes on and on. And so everything that you can say for poor outcomes on a report card for general health, men do far worse than women within our state too. So I think there's a lot of opportunities for us to do better with regards to men's health, and the only way we'll do that is to get them interested, engaged in their health, and to seek out primary care, et cetera.
You made a good point there. You said that getting people engaged in their health, because from the era that I grew up in, and the family that I grew up in, you went to the doctor when there was a problem. You didn't go for checkups very often, and and as an adult now I go in for an annual checkup, but I don't remember my parents doing that. And so we're making this cultural shift in that wellness is an activity, and I like the way you said that. Get interested in their health. How do we do that?
Well, I think it starts with some simple things, and I know you had some initiatives in the past about putting the city on a diet even. What we really need is to put the city not only on a diet, but they need to be on a program of healthy living. They need to be exercising 30, 40 minutes a day. Little simple things like a device that you can wear to monitor the number of steps you take, or a Fitbit or a watch. There's lots of technology now that can be a reminder. It doesn't make you do the exercise, but it reminds you haven't done enough today. It's time to do it. And then of course, everything in moderation. The helping people to stop smoking, that's a big one. A lot of the heart disease and lung cancers people think of, but they don't think of all the other manifestations of even smoking. And so a lot of the urologic cancers that we treat are smoking related cancers. So for example, bladder cancer. And by stopping smoking, you can reduce the risk of future occurrences of these problems as well.
Tell us about urology and your special interest, and what type of cases you've seen over your medical career.
So I'm a urologic oncologist. I specialize in cancers of the urinary tract. That happens to be the most common male cancer, prostate cancer, but we also treat kidney cancers, bladder cancers, and the most common cancer in young men, ages 20 to 40, that's testicular cancer. So if you took all of the urologic cancers and put them together, it's about 1/3 of all adult cancers. And so I've spent most of my life kind of devoted towards management of those diseases, not only prevention, but also surgical interventions and different ways to manage them.
Yeah. How much does genetics play into these particular ailments?
Well, there are some genetic components to all these cancers, but to be honest, most people don't have a family history. There's not 2 or 3 affected relatives, so environmental factors really weigh in, and that gets back to the lifestyle component as well.
At what age would you recommend a young man take a test to see if they may be developing this type of work?
So for prostate cancer, for example, probably around age 50 to 70 is sort of the target audience for getting a checkup, getting a screening test. If you have a family history, though, brother, uncle, the father, if you're African American, you probably should start earlier, perhaps around age 45.
Mm-hmm. And what do the statistics show in Oklahoma? Do we have a particularly problem with this urinary issue?
Yeah, we're not unique. You know, in the United States, as I mentioned earlier, prostate cancer is the #1 cancer. There's probably about 2,500 cases a year. That's similar to the number of breast cancer cases that we see in the state. The #2 cancer killer is prostate cancer also. Lung cancer is the most lethal. So we have a high incidence. Probably 1 in 5 men will develop this disease. Fortunately, the deaths from the cancer are not as common because of the high incidence, but yet it still remains a very significant mortality rate for cancer of the prostate.
How do we treat prostate cancer?
Well, we don't have cure for those that have advanced beyond metastatic or far spread. So the goal is to do screening and to find these cancers early, and then to try and determine the aggressive nature of their cancer. This can be done with a variety of tools. So at the Stevenson Cancer Center, for example, we use a combination of imaging, genetic testing, and then the usual things such as the stage and grade of the cancer, along with a PSA blood test, to try and risk stratify these patients into different types of treatments depending on the aggressiveness of their cancer.
There's some incredible work going on at the Stevenson Cancer Center.
There really is. I mean, to be honest, maybe the Thunder and the Stevenson Cancer Center are two of the main drivers for my return. There's no question that that amazing building, which didn't exist before, is a gem of a resource for the city and the state. We have some technologies there that are not present in the region for sure, and you'd have to travel several states to get it. So I'll give you some examples. For diagnostics for MRI, we can fuse the MRI of the prostate with an ultrasound to target lesions that would otherwise be invisible to us. Not only can we see them with the MRI, but now we can pinpoint them like a GPS system on the ultrasound. So that improves the accuracy of our detection, and it also finds these higher grade cancers that really need to be ferreted out.
Dr. Michael Cookson is our guest today on The Verdict. We're talking about urology and prostate cancer. We'll continue right after this break.
Energy production, environmental stewardship. They both matter. That's why every little detail matters in oil and natural gas production.
Oklahoma's producers are installing no and low bleed valves at well sites and gathering stations that significantly reduce emissions.
In fact, just one can cut the emissions equal to that of 9 cars. Learn more about how Oklahoma producers are protecting the air at oerb.com/bothmatter.
The good life comes naturally to Tulsa, where nature's beauty is matched with an eye for aesthetics. A legacy of neighborhoods graced with lawns and landscaping and handsome homes. A place that seems to have patented an ideal lifestyle. Bank First is loyal to the quality of life Tulsa assures its citizens, to the priority placed on education, culture, and growth. Loyal to builders who transform raw land into residential charm. Developers who see opportunity and add vitality to Tulsa's economy. Bank First serves both enterprise and private lives that need a loyal partner. It's how we help nurture this city's very good life. Bank First. Loyal to Oklahoma. Loyal to you.
We're back on The Verdict. Dr. Michael Cookson is our guest. He's a specialist in urology at the OU Health Science Center. Let's talk about early detection and advanced stages of colon cancer, prostate cancer. How do you treat these different stages?
Sure. Well, so one thing we talked about was, the importance of having that just conversation about, am I at risk? Am I the right age? Should I get a test? Usually we start with a blood test, so it's a PSA blood test and an exam. The combination of those two can almost always tell us if you're likely to have prostate cancer. Following that, ultimately it requires a tissue sample to detect it. We're working on some ways to do more of a liquid biopsy, which would be a blood test, but that's not currently ready for prime time. Once we establish if you do indeed harbor a prostate cancer, then as we mentioned earlier, you got to stage it, look into the extent of the disease. But what we found is that many men who we diagnose with early prostate cancer have a more slow-growing, biologically safe type of tumor that can be actually monitored. So part of our monitoring includes the genetic testing that we talked about, as well as some of the imaging, and that helps us to more clearly categorize them. The problem with prostate cancer is that the treatments can impact on sexual function, urinary control, and we want to treat men that need the treatment, but we also don't want to cause harm for those who can be safely observed. So that simple, important fact is that all men don't need treatment. Some men can be observed. Of the men who need treatment, that gets back to radiation therapy, surgical therapy, and some of the things that we may get into a little bit later, but emerging are focal therapies, which have never really been out there for prostate cancer to treat just that part of the prostate that is diseased as opposed to the whole gland.
Is there a relationship between testicular cancer and prostate cancer, or are those two completely different things?
I think of them as completely different. I'm not, other than you would see a urologist for them, usually different ages. So testicular cancer hits men 20 to 40 usually, although it can occur in very young and very old. It's a very curable cancer. Self-examination, if a young man notices a lump in there, he should come forward and get checked. Many of those may not be cancer, but certainly the ones that are, that's a very curable cancer, and then left untreated, it can be very lethal. So testicular cancer is a little different than prostate. Prostate cancer tends to be more of a disease of the aging man, so it's something more commonly seen in men in their 50s and 60s and 70s.
Are you satisfied with the amount of research that's going on in the country about these diseases?
Well, prostate cancer, men's health in general, lags behind women's health. There's a variety of reasons for that. Some of it's our own fault. Men don't come forward. Men don't lobby as well for their conditions. But I think that there is a lot of important studies being done, for example, in prostate cancer. On one end of the spectrum are these patients that may not need treatment. On the other end of the spectrum are men who need multiple treatments just to cure them, the more advanced cases. And so when you don't screen for prostate cancer, you usually wait till symptoms develop, and unfortunately those patients are pretty far along. In the early stages where it's still in the prostate but aggressive, usually combinations of treatments are needed. We just helped complete a national study where we took men who would have localized high-risk disease, and they were treated with combinations of chemotherapy, hormonal therapy, and then surgical intervention, and we're going to take about 3 years to really fully fledge out those results, but I believe that we'll show major improvement over what would be standard of care, which would be just traditional radiation or surgery alone.
What causes prostate cancer? Is it just one of those things that occurs, or are there behaviors that lead a person to suffer from that?
Well, the truth is, other than family history, we don't really know. Race is certainly a genetic factor, so African American men have a higher incidence, and then in some studies have a more aggressive form. The family history tends to allow you to screen earlier because they do get it at an earlier stage. I think that in general, though, high-fat diets are associated with more cancer. So I think smoking is related, more so in bladder cancer, but there is some data to suggest that prostate cancer may also be related to that.
Give us some tips here, and if you want to be a little more general about men's health, that's fine. But what should our viewers take from this? What type of behavior can Oklahomans do that would increase or decrease their chances of developing these diseases?
Well, I think one thing is that you need to really get on a daily exercise program. Everything that is heart healthy, and by the way, even in men with prostate cancer, the number one threat to their health in general is cardiac disease. So anything that you can do to be heart healthy, that's healthy lifestyle, eating. I think one of the statistics I remember was that we are either 49th or 50th in eating vegetables every day. So eating one piece of fruit, those kind of things are important. So starts with your diet. It includes exercise, monitoring your weight, and then avoiding smoking, moderation with alcohol. All of those things are really important. Beyond that, when symptoms do occur, I think you need to get checked. As urologists, many times men won't come forward until they're having an erectile dysfunction problem. But in younger men, erectile dysfunction is a trigger for cardiac disease. So it's important that the urologist recognize that and then not only address the issue the man came with, but the root cause. And so look for vascular problems, make that referral to the primary care or the cardiologist to get them.
You know, so much of what we eat in Oklahoma City seems to revolve around fast food restaurants. You know, the city was, ultimately kind of designed around the car, and as a result, fast food restaurants have flourished. I've been told we have more fast food restaurants per capita than any city in the world, and I don't doubt that. It's certainly not something we should be proud of. But even though people are going to visit fast food restaurants, there are still choices to be made. I mean, you don't have to pick the worst thing on the item. So give us some example on healthy choices. If you're going to eat out, what type of items should you be staying away from, and what time should you gravitate toward?
Well, I think that we all know that reducing our intake of red meat would be helpful, probably more salad related. And then the total calories are important to look at too. Portions are getting smaller. You said the fast food, and I mean, it isn't just that it is fast food, but there is a move afoot to more fresh, table side delivery, where you're not just eating fried foods and that sort of thing. I was just in New York City last weekend, and they have these food courts now that are emerging across the country where you develop a lot of fresh foods and things that are not fried, all in one setting. So it looks just like a food court that you traditionally see at a mall, but the choices are so much better for you. So I think it's about calories, looking at the types of food you eat, more vegetables, more fruit, less fried, and probably less red meat.
I'm wearing a Fitbit on my wrist, and you are too. Tell us about that as technology goes, and perhaps it's more applicable to men just because by nature we're so competitive and we like to quantify what we're doing, and we know whether we've done a good day with our steps or whatever. But talk about the movement of the Fitbit and the wearable technology in general and how you think it affects your job.
Well, I do wear a Fitbit. I think it isn't just men. Of course, it's women too. Some of the new watches are coming out with ways to not only measure how much steps you're taking, the calories you're burning. They'll measure your pulse. They'll look at all these different things. I think those are just good, solid reminders that we need to get out and be active. I know that some of the parks that are being created in Oklahoma City, I mentioned I was in New York, we walked all over Central Park, we logged 9 miles of walking on Saturday. You don't get to do that unless you have the trails and the facilities to do that. It's so easy just to get in your car and drive. So I think that it's part of urban renewal, but it's also just part of getting out and being active. So all those things are healthy, and we just need to do more of it.
I want to give you a chance to talk about the University of Oklahoma, the Health Science Center, and the Stevenson Cancer Center. We have just a few seconds left.
Yeah, well, I want to say that the Stevenson Cancer Center is an amazing resource. When I came here a couple of years ago, more than one patient said to me, "This is one of the best kept secrets in the state." It doesn't need to be a secret anymore. It's a resource. We have multidisciplinary care there. You can see a urologist, a radiation oncologist, a medical oncologist, all in the same building, all within the same time period. So we collaborate we have tumor boards where we discuss the individual management beyond just a single expertise, and we're building teams there. Yeah. So I think those are some of the amazing developments that are going on.
Dr. Michael Cookson, Chairman of the Urology at the OU Health Science Center. Thanks for coming on The Verdict.
Thanks for having me.
I hope our viewers learned a lot, and hopefully they'll schedule that appointment sooner rather than later. I'll have a final word when we get back.
There are now 11 million of us who live here and work here. I was 15 when I came here 6 years ago. I raised my family here. I drive my truck to my job every day. The only difference between now and 6 years ago, I do it legally. I wanted to. Because this is my home.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. For more information, call 23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
We are a very conservative family, and we believe in old-fashioned family values. We have a loving home there, and we love kids, and we have 5, 6 of our own. And but I had no idea we were going to go into adoption, but it's been very gratifying.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information.
And for almost 30 years, Oklahoma political, government, and business leaders have turned to the McCarville Report for accurate, reliable, inside information. Visit the McCarville Report online.
And welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett wrapping up a show with Dr. Michael Cookson, who's the chairman of urology. Very interesting guy who, I think it's a big success story that we've been able to bring a doctor of his quality back to the state. He mentioned he attended Midwest City High School, went to the University of Oklahoma, but was gone for over a decade, but saw the improvements coming to Oklahoma City, saw the opportunities at the Stephen Cancer Center, and wanted to be a part of it. So it's great to have him back in the community, and I hope you'll use this show as an opportunity to go get a checkup. We have a long way to go on men's health. Website information, you can find out more about the Health Science Center at ouhsc.edu. That's ouhsc.edu. And we have a website, theverdict.tv. Please head there and tell us about a guest you'd like to see. See you next week.